"I'm canceling the party, Mom. Ava says it's unnecessary." That's how my son began the call. No greeting, no hesitation. Just that. I looked down at the paper napkins on the counter off-white with a soft stitched border, the number 1954 printed neatly in gold. I'd ordered them 2 weeks ago. They'd just arrived that morning. "We've got some things we need to take care of," Miles continued. "It's not personal. We just need the money elsewhere right now. Not personal. Just my 70th birthday. Just the one day I'd asked for in years. Just the cake I'd already placed an order for. The invitations, 6 of them had already gone out. Claire had called the night before to ask if she should bring sparkling water or wine. I didn't argue. I didn't ask what elsewhere meant. I simply said, "No problem," and pressed the red button on the screen. The call ended with a soft click that seemed to echo through the kitchen. I stood there a long time. Later that afternoon, I took the chicken out of the freezer and gave it to the neighbor's dog. Emptied the fridge. Took down the string lights from the porch. I folded the garden chairs and stacked them against the fence. I even swept the walkway not out of habit, but because I needed the rhythm. When I finished, I locked the front gate from the inside and drew the blinds. It wasn't anger, not even sadness, just quiet. I didn't call Claire. I didn't post anything. I didn't explain. That night, I placed the guest list back in the drawer with the stamps. I slid the stitched napkins back into their plastic wrapping and tucked them under a pile of old linens. Out of sight. By morning, I had already begun packing. Just a few clothes, my notebook, the deed in its folder. And my phone turned off, left on the kitchen counter. The tea had gone cold by the time I picked up the pen. I sat at the table, the folded guest list spread out in front of me. Claire, Edna, Marcy, the twins from the library. I'd chosen each name carefully, people who knew me as more than someone's mother or someone's inconvenience. One by one, I drew a slow line through each name. Not from anger, not even sorrow, just certainty. I wasn't uninviting them. I was withdrawing myself from the expectation, from the performance, from the idea that I had to show up just to be seen. Claire called that afternoon. "Ava told us it was postponed," she said gently. "Said you weren't feeling well." I let her words hang in the air between us. "I'm fine," I said. "Just taking a break." She didn't press. The truth was simpler and sharper. I wasn't sick. I was done. That evening, a message from Ava appeared on my screen. "Sorry if we hurt your feelings. Miles just wants what's best for the family." There it was, wrapped in politeness, buffered by excuses. My feelings framed as an inconvenience. A footnote. I didn't reply. Instead, I stood in the doorway of the dining room and looked at what was left. The bunting I'd planned to hang over the fireplace. The place cards I'd written by hand. The string of lights still coiled in the basket by the back door. I took them down, piece by piece. Folded the cards. Coiled the lights. Placed everything back in the plastic bin, marked spring. Each movement felt deliberate, steady. No rush. No noise. That night, I walked through the rooms in silence, brushing dust from the table corners, fluffing the couch cushions no one would sit on. They'd chosen to take the day from me. I chose to take myself from them. The next morning, I opened the hall closet and reached for the safe behind the coats. I used to believe that keeping the peace was a kind of strength, that saying yes quietly held more weight than saying no loudly. That's what women like me were taught, that patience was a form of love, and sacrifice was its proof. So I gave. I gave when Miles asked me to sell my father's antique book collection, the ones with handwritten margins and cracked leather spines. He needed help with law school, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. I gave when Ava moved in and said the curtains made the house feel stuck in time. I packed them away. The rug followed. Then the wall art. One day, I looked around and realized my living room had become their showroom. My guest suite became my new bedroom. I gave up space color rhythm. Things disappeared gradually, like objects carried off by a slow river. Now they'd taken the one day I'd kept for myself. I stood in front of the bookshelf where the deed sat, tucked between two dictionaries. My name was still there first and middle, not theirs. But Ava had mentioned it once. Over dinner, casually. It would be easier, if we were all on the title. Legally, in case of emergencies. I smiled at the time, said I'd think about it, then said nothing else. Now I wondered how many conversations they'd had about my home when I wasn't in the room. They were building something for themselves, their next chapter, their clean slate, and I had become the land underneath it. Old foundation, a formality, a favor. I opened the dictionary next to the deed and slid it out. The folder was still sealed from when I updated the paperwork 3 years ago. I held it in my hands for a long moment before placing it into my tote. I had no intention of handing anything over. The next day, Miles called and asked if I'd come to dinner. Said they had something to talk about. Miles called it just a family dinner, which should have been my first warning. Ava opened the door before I reached the second step, beaming in a way that didn't match the history between us. "You look good," she said too quickly, ushering me in before I could answer. "How's the arthritis? You're staying warm?" Right. The questions weren't conversation. They were scaffolding, soft tissue before the needle. I sat at the table and waited. Dinner plates were already cleared before Miles took his seat properly. He didn't start with a story or a courtesy. He started with a breath, prepared, rehearsed, practiced. "We're thinking of buying the lot next door," he said. "It opens up possibilities for expansion." I said nothing. I didn't need to. They kept going. Ava leaned in, palms open, like someone asking for cooperation, not sacrifice. "The bank wants collateral, that's all. It's a formality. Temporary. We'll pay everything. You won't even notice." Miles slid the folder across the table. Not a stack of blank papers. Not a conversation starter. A completed packet. Initials flagged. Paragraphs highlighted. Notarized. The anchor points already decided, like a move in chess you only notice after the check. All it needed was a signature. My signature. The one that used to sign permission slips and school forms and the back of birthday cards. Now apparently useful for acquiring land. I opened the packet slowly. The shuffle of paper was the only honest sound in the room. No carelessness. No spontaneity. They'd prepared more for this moment than for my birthday. Ava smiled too brightly. Miles watched my face too closely. "I'll think about it," I said, folding the packet neatly shut. I excused myself toward the bathroom and kept walking past the hallway. Past the mirrors, past their hopeful posture through the front door, and into the night. Cold air didn't shock me. Expectation had. My car was still where I left it. My keys still mine. My name still mine. And as I drove away, the silence around me finally felt like a beginning, not an ending. I left the house before dawn when the street was still deciding whether it belonged to night or morning. My phone stayed on the counter exactly where I'd placed it, face up, powered on, reachable by anyone who wanted silent proof of my absence. I took a single canvas bag, a notebook, and the folder holding the deed. No jewelry, no nostalgia, no guilt. The bus smelled of weak coffee and rain-damp coats. I sat near the window watching Oregon blur into pine and fog. No one asked where I was headed. That was the first time leaving felt like arrival. Marcy, a cousin of Claire's, lived in a salt-washed town in Washington, where the mornings tasted like cold wind and anonymity. She didn't ask for details. She set a cup in front of me, pointed to a spare room, and said, "Stay as long as you need." That was all the permission I required. 3 days passed, then 6, then 12. Curiosity began knocking through voicemail. impatient, then confused, then irritated voices stacked themselves in my inbox like an argument without a witness. "Where are you, Mom? This is unnecessary. I didn't mean to cancel it like that." Silence, then edge. Then the brittle sound of panic cracking. Ava's message arrived last flat and surgical. "You're being dramatic." I deleted it without opening it twice. On the 13th day, I took a morning walk to the county courthouse. The clerk knew the rhythm of people who came seeking answers quietly. She didn't rush me. My name was still on the deed, undisturbed, unshared, entirely mine. But the inquiry log told a secondary truth. An attempt to initiate partial title review had been submitted recently. No authorization, no warning, just paperwork moving behind my back like a tide testing a shoreline. They hadn't succeeded. But they'd assumed they could. I left the courthouse with something heavier than confirmation. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. And clarity travels fast even when carried slowly in the pocket of a woman everyone assumed would stay seated. I returned in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. No fanfare. No announcement. Just the quiet click of the spare key they didn't know I kept. The house inhaled when I stepped inside, dust-settling wood, remembering weight it once carried. No voices. No footsteps. No judgment waiting behind a corner. The stillness felt almost respectful. I walked past the living room first. The new furniture looked exactly the same, untouched by consequence, comfortable in someone else's certainty. I didn't sit. The hallway closet came next. Same door, same hinge that slightly groaned when you pulled it open just right. Coats draped in neat, seasonal obedience. Boots aligned like props in a scene someone else was directing. Behind the coats, behind the predictable, there was the part of the house that answered only to me. The safe. It was small, unremarkable, the kind no one suspects, because it doesn't demand attention. I knelt, entered the code, and felt the lock surrender with a metallic sigh. Inside was the life they assumed I no longer managed. The deed. My birth certificate. Updated tax documents. The insurance policies Miles believed I never bothered to read. And beneath them, folded once edges softened by time, a letter in my husband's handwriting. "Don't give it all away, Irma. Hold something for yourself." I didn't cry. I didn't argue with memory. I simply took everything to the dining table, unfolded it with slow care, and made copies, front and back signatures included. I updated my will on the spot pen, steady decisions long past emotional debate. When I was done, I returned each piece to its place. Nothing missing, nothing disturbed, nothing suspicious to an untrained eye. Before leaving, I retrieved my phone from the kitchen counter where I'd left it days ago. One voicemail sat unopened, trembling with weight. "Please, just call me back. I don't know what's going on." I listened without moving. They never pictured me as someone who saved proof, who stored leverage, who prepared for later. I walked back to the door key, turning softly behind me, knowing the next time I crossed this threshold it wouldn't be as someone returning, but someone arriving. I turned 70 on a quiet afternoon beneath a wide sky and the smell of something baking. Marcy cleared off the patio table and placed a cotton runner down the middle. Claire brought a bundt cake in a tin, so old it looked like it held stories as much as sugar. There were no balloons, no speeches, no matching napkins with the year stitched in gold. Just warmth and people who showed up not out of guilt, but out of care. Someone brought lentil soup. Someone else brought a photo album from the library days. Marcy put on an old record that skipped slightly in the same place it always had. We didn't mind. The skip had become part of the song. I didn't think about Miles. No one asked where he was. No one tiptoed around the silence he left. It was the first gathering in years where I didn't feel like the shadow of someone else's plan. I wasn't squeezed between expectations. I was centered, just as I was. I laughed real and deep, the kind of laugh that warms you from the inside out. Claire clinked her glass against mine and whispered, "You look like you remember yourself again." That evening, I sat at Marcy's kitchen table and opened my phone. The missed calls had slowed, but the texts remained. "Please, just tell me you're okay. Mom, we need to talk. You're acting like we hurt you." I typed one sentence. "I'm well. Please do not come looking for me." I read it twice. I meant every word. Then I blocked each number one by one, like closing doors in a hallway I no longer walked through. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just felt still and whole and entirely mine. When I closed the phone and looked outside the garden, lights flickered on without needing to be told, and somewhere in the distance, I remembered the sound of my own life moving forward. Ava posted a photo of an empty dining table dimly lit and artfully staged. The caption read, "She's abandoned the family." It wasn't grief. It was theater. Miles commented underneath something about concern, that they'd tried calling, that they were worried. Claire showed me the post on her phone while we were drinking coffee in the garden. She didn't say anything, just turned the screen toward me, then smiled and set it back down. "They're fishing," she said. I nodded. Let them cast their lines. I was no longer in their pond. Later that week, Ava walked into the bank. Her lipstick was perfect, her confidence louder than the heels she wore. She asked to speak to someone about refinancing, used phrases like family property next door lot, legacy planning. The woman behind the glass tapped a few keys, paused, then said flatly, "You're not on the title. I'm afraid we can't process this request." Ava's voice lowered, her charm sharpened. But charm doesn't overwrite paper. Meanwhile, Miles opened the pantry at home looking for something, maybe coffee, maybe comfort, and found instead a letter taped to the back wall. The handwriting was mine. "Don't look for me in your expectations. I'm not there." I didn't need them to read between the lines. I'd written them plainly enough. They went to see the lawyer I used when I first rewrote my will. Thought maybe they could reason with him or outmaneuver me. He was polite, professional, clear. Everything had been finalized. The title, the documents, the trust structure. My wishes were protected. My silence wasn't neglect, it was design. He handed them a summary copy. They didn't ask for a second one. Afterward, they sat in their car outside the office. I don't know what they said to each other. I imagine there was a lot of silence, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of realization that the woman they dismissed had been paying closer attention than they thought. The next morning, I woke before sunrise and began packing a small overnight bag. I arrived just after noon, months after I'd last touched the gate. The grass had grown uneven. The mailbox leaned forward like it was tired of waiting. I didn't ring the bell. I still had the key they assumed I'd forgotten. It turned without resistance. The air inside was hollow, not musty, just still like it had been holding its breath too long. Furniture stood in the same arrangement. Ava had chosen all cool colors and hard corners, none of it meant to comfort. I walked through each room slowly, the way a museum guide might. Not with reverence, but recognition. I nodded to where my reading chair used to sit, the spot on the windowsill where basil once grew, the tiny chip in the tile near the sink, still there, still mine. Upstairs, the hallway mirror had been replaced with a canvas print of mountains neither of them had ever visited. It meant nothing, so I kept walking. In the kitchen, I stopped. Tucked behind a stack of cookbooks I hadn't used in years was a silver-framed photo. Miles, maybe age 10, holding a paper crown he'd made at school. He was missing a front tooth and smiling like the world hadn't asked anything of him yet. I held the frame for a long time before placing it gently into my tote. Then I opened the drawer by the fridge, pulled out a blank notepad, and wrote 5 lines. "The home is no longer available. Please seek your future elsewhere. No forwarding address. No further explanation. No apology owed. Irma. I left the note on the entry table centered clean, impossible to miss. Then I locked the front door, this time from the outside. The key stayed in my coat pocket as I walked down the steps. The wind had shifted by then, just enough to brush past my collar, like something saying goodbye. By dusk, I was already somewhere else, headed toward the life I was building, not the one I was expected to preserve. The house I live in now is smaller. 2 rooms, 1 story, no stairs to climb or voices to lower. Every shelf holds something I chose. A ceramic bowl from a roadside market. A small bird statue with chipped wings. A jar of buttons I'll probably never use. No one has asked me to repaint the walls or move the furniture. The curtains are lace, not fashionable, but they let in the kind of light that forgives everything. I teach twice a week at the library. Nothing formal. Just reading circles and quiet afternoons, helping children learn to pronounce words their mouths haven't mastered yet. Sometimes they ask about my name, and I tell them it's old, but steady. Like a stone that remembers water. On a Thursday, I found a letter in the mailbox. Not a bill, not a printed advertisement. A letter. The handwriting was Miles's. I knew it immediately. I stood with it in my hand for a full minute before opening it inside at the small kitchen table where the basil plant now lives. It wasn't long. I'm sorry. For the party. For the pressure. For forgetting you're a person. No signature beyond his first name. No excuses. No explanations. Just that. I read it once. Then again. Then I folded it neatly and placed it under the basil pot, its edges sticking out just enough to remind me I hadn't imagined it. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to forgive. I just noted the change in tone, how different a whisper of remorse sounds compared to the thud of assumption. Later that afternoon, I stepped out into the garden. The soil was warm. The mint had started creeping sideways. The tomato vines clung to their posts, like they knew what they were reaching for. I watered the beds one by one, slow and even careful, not to disturb the roots. Nothing bloomed out of order here. Nothing pushed itself forward too fast. Everything had its time, and this time it was mine.